Okay. Hello, everyone. Happy Mother's Day. Hope you all had a nice day. I had a pretty nice day. My brother and his girlfriend came over, and I cooked a bunch of boiled shrimp for my mom, which she loved, which came out really well. And we barbecued and drank a whole lot of wine and got really drunk, and then I fell asleep, and then I woke up about half an hour ago. So, as promised, I'm going to talk about this book for a bit. Well, I could also tell you that okay. So Mother's Day is actually created as sort of an anti-war thing, and I tried explaining that to my mother today in hopes of encouraging her to engage in a political discussion, which died to die. Like she came home from church, and then I was my mother was talking a bit about what the sermon was about and how the origins of Mother's Day, and then so I started explaining it also, and she didn't know anything that I was talking about, and she basically kind of like had a moment where she was like, "Oh, I didn't know that," and then she went, "Oh, okay, let's eat." So I didn't even get to the point where I got to explain that like various organizations are working on encouraging women to know more about other mothers in other countries, like in Pakistan and Afghanistan, so that way we can build an anti-war coalition around this idea. Well, I couldn't even bring that up. It's really interesting. It's really hard to even bring up politics with people now. Like they're all watching CNN and they don't know what's really going on. I brought up the airstrikes in Pakistan today, and and one person just kind of gave me a look. They were like, "Oh, I didn't hear about that at all." So, oh, my work is never done. Only I can get paid. Okay, so this book is titled "Disposable People" by Kevin Bales, and actually, it's not new. It came out in 1999, I believe. This picture is actually a picture of gold diggers in Brazil. This very buff African-looking man is grabbing a gun for this soldier. So this book essentially, 1999. That's right. So it's got a new preface on it, but it's about 10 years old now. This book says that there are about 20 million slaves in the world today. The term slave has been used in different. The term slave has changed. We don't use the term slavery anymore. We use the term trafficking, servants, other things, but we don't use the term slavery. And additionally, the word slavery has been stretched out in a variety of ways. We often, if you're at a dead-end job with no chances of future promotion, you're called a wage slave, for example. Well, that doesn't get counted as slavery in this book. Going by his very specific definition of people who are, I really should have probably should have wrote this down. Well, let me see. Let's see if I can find it really quickly. Let me see. Well, so very specifically, is people who are stuck in a position that they cannot get out of. You are either through debt or through ethnic heritage ties. You are bonded to someone else and you can't leave. And then this slavery, the modern slavery. So when most people think of slavery, they think of the African slave trade, which ended in 1865 in the United States. Um, but that slavery, when that slavery became illegal, essentially it just slavery itself morphed into different forms. 27 million slaves. There we go. I knew it was something like that. And so this book goes through all of those different forms. So, for example, in Thailand, a number of women from the northern part of the country end up going south and look for work because and then they end up getting captured or lied to anyway, and they get put in brothels where they are used as sex slaves, and they may end up having to have sex with, I don't know, 10, 15 guys a night just to make enough money. And they're not only sex slaves, they're in debt. So they're given a certain amount of money. They're told they have to take money out of their paycheck for food, and then increasingly, and they have to pay money to stay in the brothel. And then increasingly, the debt just gets so big that they'll never be able to pay it off unless they end up having sex with like 30 guys every day. So these people are essentially slaves. And then, of course, what inevitably happens is if they try to run away, they're beaten. The police are in on it also. So if they try to run away and go to the police, they're captured. And then usually after a few years, these people are considered, well, usually after a few years, the woman is considered disposable, wasted, and so she's thrown out in the streets, where often many of these women go back north to their villages and end up dying of AIDS. Okay, that's Thailand. And then they talked about brick makers in Mauritania, which is more like the old style slavery. The black Mauritanians, the certain section of the black Mauritanians are slaves for the Arab, whiter Mauritanians. In Brazil, the people, the Native American and African peasants who make charcoal, they cut down the rainforest to make charcoal in these batterias. They're basically, and even in America we have slavery today. I've read reports of Hispanic immigrants having their papers confiscated, their legal papers confiscated, and they've been locked in the truck or locked on a property and no ability to get out. So that's basically what slavery. And using that definition, and then the largest place with slavery in the world today is India, where people are in debt through farm debt. Some wealthier landowner gives you a plot of land with the debt on it. You now have to work the land to pay off the debt, which you never manage to make enough to pay off the debt. And so you're not only are you a slave, but your kids are now slaves, their kids are slaves, and so forth and so on. So there's one big difference between the slavery of then, African transatlantic African slavery of the 1800s and now, which is that people are a lot more expendable. The world the world had a population boom in the last 50 years, where now we have billions and billions and billions of people. So the price of slave labor has gone down dramatically. A slave a lot of people don't know this, but a slave in the 1800s could cost like $50,000 in today's money, because eventually the price of slaves kept going up, and once they stopped selling slaves to the New World, the price of slaves went up a lot higher, because you had to deal with the black slaves that were in the country. And one of the things that why slavery, you could argue why slavery ended, is because it became so expensive to manage a slavery system. It's a lot easier to just have a system where you make factories and just pay people wages. Certainly, I don't meet too many people who really believe that slavery ended because it was just wrong, or the abolition movement ended slavery. I really doubt that. It's really more economics that ended slavery. But the slavery today is people are a lot more expendable, which is why the name of this book is Disposable People. So and the thing is I'm trying to give you guys an overview, because it goes into detail about each of these people's lives, and it's really like breaks your heart. It makes you want to cry. I've read a lot about slavery, the transatlantic African slave trade, and learning about my African heritage. And so I'm, reading those stories about what happened to slaves, ex-slaves, their slave narratives, and then comparing it with these stories today, it's like the same. It's the same thing. It's the literal same thing. They're slaves. They know they're slaves too. That's the interesting part. If they know they're in debt, so they know essentially they are slaves. And so this book really brings up a real point, which is that why is it that groups like the IMF and the World Bank, the WTO, human rights groups make big deals about trade regulations. They make big deals about piracy. They make big deals about certain things, but yet they don't raise remotely as much money to fight slavery. Slavery. We're not even. By the way, the United States gives a huge bunch of money to the Mauritanian government to maintain this system as well. But I don't know. How do you feel about the fact that we have slavery today? Not everybody who works in a sweatshop is a slave. Of course, obviously, it's pretty crappy all the way around, but they're not slaves. But there are people today who are literally slaves. They are locked up. They are completely controlled. They have no free will of their own. And then when they're no longer needed, they are discarded and left to die. And this happens to 27 million people, and that's a low ball estimate at that, around the world today. So I don't know. I find I've tried bringing up this book so far to a number of other people, and it kind of fell on deaf ears, and it's really strange. It seems like if people can avoid, sometimes, honest to God, I'm gonna stray away from this book for a second. Sometimes, honest to God, I feel like I'm like losing my mind. And I figured the reason why I feel like I'm losing my mind is because I know all this stuff and no one cares. That's what it is. It's, if I start talking about politics, if I start talking about slavery, actually, I was gonna during this barbecue we just had, I was gonna bring up this Foucault book I was reading, and like you could tell, like everybody just kind of glazes over. They're just not accustomed to having that kind of conversation and thought. So, anyway. So I encourage all of you to read this book because I really learned a lot about slavery, and I think we all need to work together to spread awareness and stop it.